Live from... This is
the Just End the Suffering podcast.
For the win. Got it! Oh! He broke his ankle. Follow me. Now ready for this.
Here's your host, Mike Phillips.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Just End the Suffering podcast, talking New York sports from a long-suffering fan. I'm your host, Mike Phillips. We already have a podcast out this week. We talked New York Rangers, Rick Carpinello, the Ranger Fan Forum, all that good stuff. But we do have a bonus podcast this week talking about the coronavirus chaos in baseball. Joining me today, our legal correspondent on the podcast, somebody who I did not think we have to talk to about baseball's problems again so soon, Phil Fraietta. Phil, how are you?
Hi, Mike. I'd say it's good to be back, but it's I'm back under some a bad situation. So I kind of wish we weren't talking about this right now, but otherwise I'm good.
Yeah, I mean, let's put it this way: like, we're recording on Tuesday night, July 28th. I'm sitting here in the back of my room. I have the Mets Red Sox game on TV. You do not have that luxury. The Yankees are not playing tonight, thanks to a bunch of issues that happened over the weekend with the good old Miami Marlins.
Yeah, I was watching the Mets earlier too, because like you said, I don't have a Yankee game to watch. I thought I'd be watching Garrett Cole pitch tonight, but that's not going to be the case.
Yeah, it will not be the case. We'll get to all the fallout for this, but before we get to all of that, I want to point out that this whole situation, one of the concerns that we had back when we were discussing this back in May, all I can say is right now I feel like the league itself, they got to be on red alert. To pick on everybody, this all starts with the Marlins and their opening series against the Phillies on Friday. They have their catcher Jorge Alfaro test positive. They get to Sunday, 3 more people test positive for their Sunday game. They play anyway. They find out 8 more guys test positive. Another 4 tested positive today, and we're still in the window here. And Phil, I'm going to start off here. What the world happened here that the Marlins got to decide to play this game themselves on Sunday?
I don't know. I wish I could give you a good answer. Apparently, they took a team vote and decided that they wanted to play, and that's absolutely insane to me. Take a team vote. We want to play. That's the kind of thing you do when a teammate passes away, or something
sick.
Like that. Somebody's sick, right? You don't do that when people on your team are carrying a deadly virus. If I were the Philadelphia Phillies, I would be absolutely outraged. But the culprit, once again, is Rob Manfred in Major League Baseball. I don't understand how Major League Baseball allows that to happen. They should be the ones making the decision. And there isn't a decision to be made. Once you have an outbreak on a team, which I would define as even 2 or 3 positives, there's no way that team should be playing that day. You got to cancel the game.
Yeah, 2 or 3 in quick succession, mind you. If they have 1 a week ago and 1 today, it's not an outbreak. If they have, like we happened with the Marlins, you have 1 on Thursday and then 3 more on Sunday, then you're like, whoa, something's going on here. We need to stop this. The MLB should not have said, okay, Don Mattingly, you your team decide if you're feeling good enough to play today.
Yeah, exactly. And you should have stopped it immediately at that point, because you know that if we have 4 who tested positive, there could be much, much more. We just don't know. So why would you put the Philadelphia Phillies in that situation? Now, baseball, it appears, so far has lucked out, and that nobody on the Phillies has got this thing so far. But as we're going to get to, the ripple effects of this have been, you've affected 5 teams now. The Phillies are not going to play a game until Friday. The Yankees have missed 2 games now because of this. The Orioles missed games.
Yeah, and you changed the schedule for the Yankees, too.
Right. Now the Yankee schedule changes. The Orioles schedule changes. And then now you get the Nationals. They have a whole different situation because of this, because they can't go down to Miami to play. So baseball let this just completely domino when all they had to do was cancel that game on Sunday, and at least we would only be talking about the Marlins instead of 4 or 5 other teams now.
Yeah, the big issue here is, like, obviously these cases exploded right now, and the thing that I think I don't fault the Marlins specifically for I think the problem is you gave them the choice because these are professional athletes. They are never going to say we don't want to play. If they say, you know what, like we sent the guys home and heard Rob Manfred in his interview with Tom Verducci on MLB Network say, oh, we did some contact tracing, we helped people out. Like if they're going to say, okay, we got everybody out who's sick, we feel good, we're going to play. They're not going to say, no, we're going to be cautious. This is something you have to stop them from basically hurting themselves here.
Absolutely, yeah. You can't leave a decision like that in the hands of a bunch of 20-something-year-old kids. They don't know any better. They don't understand that there's lags in the virus. And what I thought was really unfair about what Manfred did was he basically threw Don Mattingly in front of a microphone for 24 hours to answer all the questions about this. And Don Mattingly doesn't know what the hell is going on. He's a manager. So it's just a complete disaster by Major League Baseball. They should have canceled that game. And by not doing so, they have now impacted 4 or 5 other teams. But that said, they still got a whole different problem on their hands because now you have half of the Marlins roster with COVID-19.
Yes, you do. We'll circle back to Manfred in May. And speaking of that roster right now, there was talks earlier today that, before they sorted this out, there's talks like, oh, they got to sign guys off the street. They got to use their taxi squad. And I've seen a bunch of epidemiologists on Twitter saying, whoa, we still don't know how many people of them are actually infected yet because the incubation period is usually like the safest you could do is 5 days before you know who's infected and who's not. And you can't just assume because they haven't tested positive in 2 days, they're ready and to fill the roster. So I think the odds here of like asking Miami right now, who's up to about 17 players in their traveling party tested positive for the virus, ask them to field a team on that short notice was not fair to them. So I'm glad the league finally said, we're going to pause them for a week and then take them out of the schedule, let them sort their situation out.
That was the right thing to do. And look, what the reports are out now that apparently maybe the reason this happened is some of the guys on the Marlins decided to break the protocol and go out Wednesday night when they were in Atlanta for an exhibition. I hope that's the case, to be honest with you, because if that's the case, then at least we know what the problem was. This could be, fair warning to the rest of you guys. You really need to follow the protocols. If that was not the case, though, and they did follow the protocols and they still got sick, then we have a big, big problem.
Yes, indeed. And you mentioned there are rumors out there. Bob Nightingale has reported on a couple of radio interviews that he's heard that several Marlins on Miami, like when they were in Atlanta for an exhibition game on Wednesday, I think Tuesday night, I want to say, went out and basically went out of the town for the night. And then the next day they had an exhibition game where it was raining and all of them were piled in the dugout. And that probably the easiest way to explain the spread of it going so quick. They're all in close quarters, very few masks in the dugout, social distancing not really happening. So that's something you could say, okay, isolated incident. This is a warning shot for the rest of the league saying, hey, don't be stupid. You could take your entire team out by being reckless. But you're right. If it's something like where they just caught it in the protocol, they're all hanging out, doing the right things, then you have an issue.
Right. And one thing you did mention that baseball needs to change, and I haven't heard them. They need to address the rain delay policy immediately. Yeah. You cannot have a situation where you have players like what happened with the Yankees on opening night. You had the Yankees and the Nationals hanging out in the clubhouse for hours on end to determine if they were going to come back and play that game. They should have called that game after 15 minutes. The whole point is to minimize the amount of time guys spend with each other. That's why if you watch the game, you have people sitting in the stands and they're not sitting in the dugout. So if that's the whole point of this thing, then you can't have people sitting in the clubhouse while it rains. You got to just call the game and play it another day, or if you've got the minimum amount of innings in, then so be it.
Yeah, that's true, because I think, I get the point, hey, if it's close or it's a fourth inning, I think you should basically see here and say, look, if we're not going to get the tarp off in an hour, we're calling the game. That's the way it should be going from here on forward, because you have teams here, you can pick up suspended games the next day. They changed that rule, so I think there's no excuse for that. And honestly, the players themselves have to step up a bit, because, I don't know how much of the Mets you've been watching. We've seen plenty of guys high-fiving, plenty of guys, hanging out closer in the dugout, not really wearing masks in the dugout. Stuff like that's a risk factor.
Sure. Yeah, the players they're responsible for that too. Now, look, is that as big of a risk factor as going out to a bar or a restaurant, like it sounds like the Marlins guys did? No, it's not. But as a totality of the circumstances, you got to take all of it into account. and they need to be more careful because they dodged the bullet here. And you get another situation like this, and this season might not be able to go on.
Yeah, it might not. And obviously, I want to circle back to Rob Manfred, who, again, was very happy to sit there on ESPN on Thursday night during the end game and get praised by A-Rod and Matt Vasgersian for the extra playoff teams and his protocols. And then when catastrophe struck, he has been nowhere to be found. He had the one interview with Tom Verducci. Other than that, he's only put out 2 statements. He's not even come out today as of recording time. We're recording on Tuesday night in the middle of the Met game. It's 3-1 in the 5th inning with Pete Alonso up at bat, J.D. Davis up at bat, excuse me. He has not come out and actually spoken to the media about this. He's basically done one on, you could call it state-sponsored media on MLB Network, but you cannot be hiding in the middle of the pandemic here and just throwing statements out saying, this is what we know. And you have to be out in front of a camera and talking at this point.
Now they have a plan. They've released a plan. Manfred's got to go out and he's got to describe the plan. Yeah. And he's got to take questions from the media about the plan. What happens if the Phillies tests do come back bad? What happens if more Marlins players test positive between now and Monday? Well, I want to know the answers to all these questions. And Manfred is supposed to be a leader. He's got to go out there and lead, because you have a situation now where your game, you've mentioned the game on Thursday, but it's the highest rated regular season baseball game played in about 10 years in this country. So there are eyes on the TVs. People want to watch this. They need to hear from Rob Manfred to understand, am I going to be able to keep watching baseball or is it over?
Yeah, because they would love to hear, okay, we did an investigation. This is what went wrong. It's not going to happen again. Or we have to change this for the protocols to make sure that things are better here. One of the protocols I feel they need to change immediately is, I do not understand why, we said this back in June when we talked about the new agreement. I don't understand why we did not have daily testing from the jump.
I don't get it. I don't get it. And I was shocked to learn that not only do we not have daily testing, we're only running the tests in a couple of labs. So there's a lag time between getting the sample and actually getting it to the lab, which is crazy. At that point, it's almost ineffective.
Yeah.
If I get tested and I don't get my results for 2 or 3 days, what's the point?
Yeah. Yeah. Because
MLB needs to stop that. And sorry to cut you off there. And I also think that you're right. Manfred cannot say, "Oh, this is what we expected to happen. That's why we have a 60-man traveling squad. No big deal." That can't be your answer. You couldn't have possibly expected that after one weekend, half of a team would go down with the coronavirus. Yeah. And if you did expect that, then why the hell are you even playing?
Yeah, I said this on the other episode that came out just 2 days ago. I said, this is a disaster for MLB. When you are 4 days into the season, you have to pause a team for a week. That is not ideal. This is not what we signed up for here. You figure, okay, maybe there's a guy here, a guy there. You're not expected to have 17 Marlins, in fact, after 1 weekend of baseball.
No, absolutely not. So Manfred has to come out, and he should come out with something. Give us some sort of a change that you're going to make, whether it's daily testing. We're gonna come down hard on guys for the high fives. We're gonna change the rain delay policy so that people aren't sitting in the dugout together. You got to do something. You cannot come out and say, "Oh yeah, that's what we thought was going to happen." Because if you thought this was going to happen, then I'll say it again. Why are you playing?
Yeah, speaking of Mr. Manfred, I do have a couple of quotes from him. I'm gonna play for you here. I'm just gonna find it real quick. I mean, number one, this is a great question from Tom Verducci, and he asked him about the Marlins scenario. I want to get your reaction to the actual phrasing he said here.
It's been said that one team with an outbreak such as this is baseball's worst nightmare. Is that the way you look at this situation?
I don't put this in the nightmare category. I mean, obviously, we don't want any player to get exposed. It's not a positive thing, but I don't see it as a nightmare. We built the protocols to allow us to continue to play. That's why we have the expanded rosters. That's why we have the pool of additional players. And we think we can keep people safe and continue to play.
I want to know what Rob Manfred's nightmares are, because that's pretty bad.
Sounds like a nightmare to me. I don't quite understand what he's talking about, except maybe what he means, and I hope this isn't what he means, but I think it is, that, hey, it was only the Miami Marlins. It's not like it was the Yankees.
Yeah.
Because that's what it sounds like to me, because I have a hard time believing that if this happened to the Yankees or the Cubs or the Dodgers, we would be having the same kind of conversation right now.
Yeah, the thing that bothers me is, like, I'm looking at this and I'm seeing what you had to do here. And basically, here's the current summary. I'm going to get to the statement they put out in a second, but right now, this is what we know as of recording time. The Miami Marlins are not playing until at least on Monday, so they're going to be out of action for a week while they try and get their roster set up, figure out who has the virus. The Phillies are out until Friday. They are playing against Toronto in Philadelphia as the visiting team. That's another fun side effect of the season that Toronto's still...
Assuming... sorry to cut you up there. And that's assuming that the Phillies has come back okay.
Yeah, I think that right now the plan is that they keep testing well. On Friday morning, they're cleared. They're going to play. Right.
But there's an assumption in there. So
we're 2 days away from that.
Let's keep that in mind.
Yes.
Yep.
2 days away from that. This we know for sure. The Yankees were supposed to be playing the Phillies this week. They are going to Baltimore instead. They are playing 2 against the Orioles tomorrow and Thursday because this is a situation where the Orioles are going to be playing the Marlins. Obviously, they can't leave these two teams without games for a week, so they're getting them there. The Nationals, who are playing in Miami this weekend, actually, as a team, voted they did not want to go to Miami in this situation. MLB takes the decision out of their hands. They cancel that series. That's going to be made up later on. So, as you said at the beginning of the show, 5 different teams impacted by this decision to let the Marlins play on Sunday.
Yeah, then that's why you cannot leave these kinds of decisions in the hands of a bunch of 20-year-olds and Don Mattingly. It's not the right thing to do. And it's not a knock on Don Mattingly. It's not a knock on the 20-something-year-olds who play for the Marlins. They are not experts. MLB has consultants. They have epidemiologists consulting them. You have to defer to those guys on this kind of a situation. And the MLB needs to take control and say, this game is canceled.
Yeah, they do. And I want to point out one interesting line in the statement that MLB put out there today. And this is, I think, them trying to toot their horns a little bit. In over 6,400 tests conducted since Friday, July 24th, there have been no new positives of on-field personnel from any of the other 29 clubs. This outcome is in line with encouraging overall data since the June 27th start of testing. Through last Thursday, July 23rd, 99 of the 32,640 samples, 0.3%, have been positive. So in other words, they're throwing the Marlins on the bus saying, it's entirely their fault, our stuff is fine.
And you know what? If that's the case, that is important.
Yeah.
Because it means that you can keep this thing going. But let's not overlook the fact, too, that we don't know where the Marlins caught this thing. We don't know if they caught it in Atlanta. But let's keep in mind that they are the team that is in the coronavirus epicenter of the United States right now in Miami. And that is another problem. I'm not sure if Major League Baseball could keep the Marlins in Miami.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that either because something that came out today is the mayor of Miami, Mayor Jimenez, actually came out and said that if the Marlins are coming back home, they should quarantine for 2 weeks because they have a known exposure to the coronavirus. That was not his decision to enforce. That would go to Florida Governor Greg DeSantis, your favorite person, and we know he's not going to enforce it. But MLB might be better off avoiding his headache altogether and keeping the Marlins out of Miami for a while.
Not only do they have to worry about that, they've got other teams.
Yeah.
Like you saw with the Nationals, they don't want to go to Miami. People don't want to go to Miami right now because it's not safe. So they seriously need to consider that. And you know, Mike, when we talked about who's affected by this, we left out an important group of people. And I just want to mention them. There are now more than a dozen, or more than a dozen, 15 or so Miami Marlins who are locked up in a hotel in Philadelphia for the foreseeable future. Not a hospital, a hotel. So you now have hotel staff workers, cleaning people, bellhops, room service guys who are being exposed to coronavirus because the Miami Marlins are there. So if you're the city of Philadelphia, how do you defend that decision to your people? That, yeah, I'm taking my blue-collar service workers and throwing them in a COVID-19 hotbed because we need to play baseball? That's a tough sell if you're a local government. So I'm afraid that if this continues, local governments, even if Major League Baseball wants to push forward, they're not going to let them.
Yeah, the one government official that seems to be the most receptive to baseball is Governor Cuomo in New York, which is shocking considering how this whole thing started. He today actually offered, he said, you know what, like, if New York, like, if a team needs a home, New York will be a home because we are a low transmission area for coronavirus right now. And I think it's something that the league should strongly be considering if they actually plan on playing the season out. Like, I I know they're converting Buffalo Stadium into Major League caliber lighting. I would be doing that a couple more of the AAA affiliates up here in Syracuse and Rochester, giving yourself some options because there's a good chance you might not be able to have the Marlins there. And it's tough to ask Miami, say, hey, you're going to be the road team every game you play this season. That's not exactly fair.
No, you can't do that. You got to give them a home ball. That's a fine idea. And look, Governor Cuomo is probably trying to rub some salt in the womb of DeSantis there, given their little rivalry. That's probably part of what's going on. But I think also that Governor Cuomo understands that if he's asking people to stay home, and he's going to be asking us to do that more as the weather gets cold, baseball can really, really help. So I understand what he's trying to do. But Major League Baseball should seriously consider taking them up on that offer. Get the Marlins out of Miami, put them in Syracuse, put them in Rochester. Now, look, if I'm a Marlin player, I might not be thrilled about that. I'm being ripped out of my home, going to some boring city like Rochester. But you know what? It's better than being exposed to the virus.
Yeah, and potentially, like, you actually might get to play in Rochester. There's a chance they might not let you play in Miami anymore after all this disaster.
There's a chance, yeah. And just to change gears here, though, I do want to make sure that we at least get a little bit of a jab in at the union, because I think the union comes out looking bad here, too. Throughout the entire labor negotiation, I heard we want 114 games, we want 80-something games, tell us when and where. And now within one weekend, it sounds like your guys couldn't obey the rules. You lost the whole team. I haven't heard a word from Tony Clark. And all we're hearing is a bunch of players saying, maybe we don't want to play anymore.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? You guys were warned about this. You were told that this was going to be a problem during your labor negotiation. You didn't want to hear it because all you cared about was the money. And now you're in a situation where you're feeling the repercussions of it. So I think Tony Clark needs to come out too and make a statement and say, look, our players understand the severity of this and we're going to follow the protocol.
Yeah, and also Major League Baseball, with all of its resources, I think they need to devote some more to teams that are questionable at following the rules, because I think, like, you have enough personnel here. You can sign, like, I know the NFL has come up with this idea of, like, an infection control officer at all their facilities, make sure people are following social distancing rules, wearing masks and all that stuff. You might need to have someone independent do that for all of your teams to make sure that you're not risking outbreaks and people are doing stupid things.
That should be something that Major League Baseball and the union should be able to jointly do.
Yeah. Because
it protects the integrity of the game and it protects the players' health. And the integrity of the game is an important statement there, because that's the problem we're running into here. The Marlins are not a competitive team right now. If you were to put them out there tonight with 15 minor leaguers, that's not Major League Baseball. You can't do that. And we have to realize that. Yes, we have the 60-man roster. It's there for a reason. It's there. It's not there so that we can have 15 minor leaguers playing Major League Baseball. That's not baseball.
No, it's not. And the league itself, I do want to give them some criticism here for a couple of other things. Number one, the communication with, obviously, we called out Manfred himself for not being visible enough with the media, but the teams themselves not getting the right information. Andrew McCutcheon on the Phillies tweeted earlier today that he's going to Twitter to find out about the games being canceled because they're not getting communication from the league fast enough. And the team officials confirmed it to, I think, CNN's Jim Salisbury. And that's an issue when the teams are finding out from the media the games being canceled and doing it from the league.
Yeah, look, me personally, if I want news now, I don't even have a Twitter, but I go on Twitter. I go to Jason Stark, Lindsay Adler,
Jeff Passan,
Ken Rosenthal, Jeff Passan, Buster Olney, John Heyman, etc. You hit refresh, and you got a better chance of finding out something before Major League Baseball will tell you. And that is a big problem. It can't be that those guys get these leaks before the players even. It's embarrassing. That's the right word for it, embarrassing.
Number two, this is a statement from Marly Rivera from ESPN, and she says this is regards to hotels. I've spoken to several MLB managers in both leagues, and one thing they're really concerned about is that in team hotels being full of people. Two managers told me about weddings being celebrated at the team hotel, which were really crowded and no social distancing was practiced. I think you have to be very careful where you're taking your business here, MLB, because that's something that's a major risk that you're taking into account.
Absolutely, but what do you do about it if you're Major League Baseball? if you're in some state where the governor is allowing that kind of thing to go forward, what are you going to do? Tell the hotel we're not going to stay here if you allow a wedding to go on? It's a tough call. It's another problem that baseball kind of brushed aside when they decided that we can't do the bubble. There are other people. There are hotel workers and there are hotel guests, and those people have the right to do whatever's legal within their state. And there are some states that I think it's unfortunate, but that's a matter of opinion, that are allowing things like weddings.
I think it's as simple as what you said. I think you can easily say MLB is like, we have to follow these protocols. If you're having these things at your venues, we're going to take our business elsewhere. I think that's the easiest way to say it.
You could do that, but the problem with that is that these players are used to staying at a certain quality of hotel, and not all these cities have that many places.
Yeah,
you're not going to throw them in the Motel 6.
Yeah, that's true. That's a consideration they have to be more careful about. Another thing I think is dopey, considering the issue we're having with traveling, and something that was brought up on Twitter is a fair point. Why are we wasting a game sending the Cardinals and the White Sox to Dyersville, Iowa for the Field of Dreams game this year?
That makes no sense. Absolutely no sense. I can tell you why.
Money.
Because Major League Baseball is hoping that they get a tremendous rating for that game, and I'm sure who's got it? ESPN.
Fox
I'm sure
has
ESPN paid it, or Fox. Yeah, I'm sure they paid an arm and a leg for it.
Yeah, they
did.
But
absolutely, that game should be played like it was supposed to be played, with the Yankees and the White Sox. Play it next year, but they're not going to do that because Fox paid an arm and a leg for that.
Yeah, it's when I say to Fox, you know what, like I think it's really stupid when you're doing this to be flying two teams to Iowa for one game, then flying them back to Chicago for a second game. I think it just makes no sense in this kind of situation. And Iowa's not exactly have the virus under control either.
Yeah, it makes absolutely no sense to do it. There's no reason for it. Look, I think Rob Manfred's statement tells you all you need to hear, though. They are going to basically sacrifice these players in order to get money.
Yeah.
They're probably taking the philosophy that, look, these guys are young, they're in good shape. Statistically speaking, they're likely to be fine if they get this virus. They're not going to die. Maybe they'll have some health complications, but it's probably not going to be dire. So we're going to take our chances. And that's what, from that standpoint, I think that's where a guy like David Price is right. They're not putting the players' health first. They're playing the players' health last. They're putting the money first. But I don't think it's just Major League Baseball. I think the union's responsible for that as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And we've seen some Boston's Eduardo Rodriguez, who he's developed myocarditis after his bout of coronavirus, and that's a serious heart condition. And that's not something that you can assume all these idiots who are on Twitter saying, oh, they're young, they're athletes, they'll be fine. They're not always going to be fine. It's literally as simple as that. And right, I want to get away from this. I want to go back to the competitive integrity aspect of it, which is a joke in itself, the way MLB is phrasing it. Let's go to Rob Manfred again from the same interview with Tom Verducci, talking about what is, in his mind, the worst case scenario.
Is there a point, a critical mass, so to speak, within the league or within a team that would cause you to shut down part of the schedule, all of the schedule?
There is certainly both. There's certainly both. I mean, I think that a team losing a number of players that rendered it completely non-competitive would be an issue that we would have to address and have to think about making a change, whether that was shutting down a part of the season, the whole season. That depends on the circumstances. Same thing with respect to league-wide. You know, you get to a certain point league-wide where it does become a health threat, and we certainly would shut down at that point.
Yeah, so as far as the first part of his statement, I mean, if we have 17 Marlins is not enough to be a non-competitive situation, I don't know what is. And number two, it sounds like the doomsday scenario, it seems like, is if we have several of these across the league. If we have like 3 or 4 teams being on an outbreak at once, at that point, I think that's the shutdown point.
Well, look, let's be fair to the guy. It sounds like he did stick to what he said. He said that if we have an outbreak that renders a team uncompetitive, we might change a part of the season. And they did that. They paused the Marlins. That's a change. But what I take from that, and I still take from it reading between the lines there, is that the Miami Marlins are not important enough for us to care. It's not the Yankees. And I don't think that's right.
No, I raised the point earlier. I said, like, if this was the Yankees, if this was the Cubs, if this was the Dodgers, if this was the Mets, I think they would care a lot more than if it's the Marlins. They can say, okay, we can just put Miami to the sidelines for a week. I don't think they would say, okay, like 17 Yankees have the virus, we can put them aside for a week. We'll let everybody else keep going.
No, can you imagine Aaron Judge has this virus? Be a totally different situation.
Yeah, and the competitive integrity, that's something I think is a very interesting word because obviously with the 60-game season, right now, there's no guarantee they can get all these games in. Right now, the buzz for next week is that the plan is that the Yankees-Orioles are supposed to play next week. That series, I think there's a 3-game set. Now they're playing 2 this week. One will be thrown as a doubleheader somewhere else. They would make up these 2 4-gamers next week, assuming the tests check out for the Phillies and the Marlins. You're talking right now that the Phillies are going to have to make up 3 games that they would have played against Miami in that stretch. And to make matters worse, the Marlins had to make up about 6 more games because they have those games and the games against the Nationals. They have to squeeze in double headers. You're talking about these teams with very limited off days. You're having some teams have to do a lot of double headers, a lot of no rest. Whereas the Mets, at this point, they're going to, assuming everything goes well for them, they're going to go through 13 games and they still have 6 off days. That's a huge competitive advantage.
Yeah, it's exactly, that's the right word for it, competitive advantage. But I don't think there's anything you can do about it. It's going to be part of this season. You're going to have to live with it. The best thing you could do about it is when you have an outbreak like this, let's try and minimize the impact by canceling the damn game. There's no reason that the Yankees, the Orioles, and the Nationals should have got wrapped up into this thing.
No, and the thing that saved MLB a bit is the regional scheduling because that allowed them to do things like juggle it around a bit. But I think if you're getting to the point where, let's say, the Marlins outbreak happened, if there was one in the Central Division hubs and one in the Western divisions, I don't think MLB would be able to make it work. It'd be too many moving parts. Yeah,
that won't work. You really can't have another outbreak like this.
No,
that's the bottom line. This has to be a warning shot, and you have to hope that it really was just a case of some young guys on the Marlins doing something stupid.
Yeah, you do. And I think right now the thing to watch here also going forward is I think seeing how many games actually get played, because I think the thing that shocked me with this whole thing was how back when we were having the testing legs, we wouldn't be having practices because teams didn't have results, but we had 4 confirmed positives and play ball. That made no sense.
Makes no sense at all. Can't happen again.
Yeah.
Absolutely cannot happen again. That's the bottom line.
And with the expanded playoffs now, which is its own dopey mistake, which I'm not going to get into today, that's not relevant to this conversation, but now you have to look at it where maybe one team plays 60 games, another plays 57, another plays 54. You're going to look at it as okay, now you have to go by winning percentage to get teams in the playoffs. And they've done it in 1981, but not the ideal route here.
No, but nothing about this season's ideal. The playoffs, though, they do concern me. If I were Manfred and Clark, I'd be talking about going to a bubble for the playoffs because if you had an outbreak during the playoffs, that's it. Whole thing's over.
Yeah. I think, honestly, if I was Rob Manfred, I would be on the phone with Governor Cuomo right now saying, okay, we're going to come here for October. We're now going to have 3 parks of big league quality with the Blue Jays set up in Buffalo. So we can bring everybody here, send them to 3 separate sites, get them going, and then you have enough places to do the playoffs.
Yeah, I would be doing that too, and I'm sure Governor Cuomo would accommodate that because that's a big. Imagine if this was the playoffs right now, you can't pause the team for a week in the postseason.
No, you can't. And I think we talked about this before. You said Omaha was an option because of all the field, but I think the Nebraska's virus situation has gotten worse since then. New York's consistently been getting better, and even as they've reopened, they have not seen the numbers spike like other places have. So I think New York is still the front runner for the postseason hub, which I think is going to have to happen if they want to finish this thing out.
Yeah, it's a guessing game. That's part of the problem because you say reopen and there's it's tough to say that New York is reopened. It is as a
partially
legal matter, but I mean there's an article in the Wall Street Journal just yesterday that at least in Manhattan, their commercial buildings are reporting about 10% of the workforce are reporting to work. So is that really reopened when you have 90% of the people working from home? I don't know about that. And if that stays that way, then so be it. But if come September, people start going back to work, maybe you do get a second spike. So it's hard for Major League Baseball to forecast what the world's going to look like in October. But they need to have some contingency plans. Maybe you have multiple sites.
Yeah.
And you can have a backup plan just in case New York is a problem. But they got to have. I do not see how you're going to possibly get this playoffs in without a bubble, unless this really was just a one-off. Somebody did something stupid. It's never going to happen again. But when it happens the first weekend, it doesn't look good.
That would be a stroke of luck, and luck has not been a good thing in 2020. There's not a lot of luck happening in sports this year.
No, not at all. We're 4 games into the season, so I think it would be kind of foolish to think that this is never going to happen again.
Yeah, let's put the baseball aside, man. While you're here, we'll talk about 2 other sports that have decisions to make coming forward. College football, the next big one on the docket. It's supposed to start in August. We've seen some leagues go to conference-only models. We've seen stuff like limiting the travel windows, but we've also seen a lot of the smaller leagues, like the Ivy League, like the Patriot League, like the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference here in the New York area, have all said we're not playing fall sports this year. And I think the football leagues are just delaying the inevitable here, because I think there is no possible way they're going to be able to get this off.
Look, let me rant a little bit. There is no way in the world college sports should be going forward in the fall. I would go so far as to call it an immoral thing to do.
Yeah.
These are kids who are not even getting paid to play. How in the world can you put them out there in a situation where you know they're going to get sick? There's no way everybody knows that at least somebody's going to get sick. And statistically speaking, given how many college athletes there are, somebody is going to die. I think that is just an immoral decision to say that we're going to send these kids out there who aren't even getting paid. So that is just wrong. There's a difference between professional athletes who are represented by a union, negotiating some safety protocol and getting paid millions of dollars to go basically risk their health doing this. To do that to a college kid is wrong, and it should not happen. Should not be allowed to happen. In my opinion, I would shut that down if I were a politician. I think it's wrong, and I don't even know how they defend it. How do you defend it? How do you say that we can't have students on campus for class, but we're going to have football games? It makes no sense.
It really does not. And the idea that a lot of these people who are desperately want football to happen is like, oh, they're young, they're healthy, they'll be fine. I'm like, and I got into an argument on Twitter with somebody about this the other day, and he's like, well, they want to play. I'm like, yeah, they want to play. What athlete worth his salt is not going to want to play? You have to protect them from themselves. And it's a very bad look when you have rich schools getting richer off of athletes who are not getting paid and risking their health for your entertainment. That's a very awkward look for college sports.
Absolutely. And look, this isn't a political or racial podcast, but there's both political and racial undertones to that. It's no secret that a large majority of college football players are African American, and a lot of these big college football schools are down in the South, and supported by very wealthy white benefactors. There's an argument there that it's some wealthy white guys throwing some black kids out there and saying, we don't really care what happens to you because we want to watch football. It's a big, big problem. It cannot go on. And this, their young and healthy argument, they're not getting paid. So even if one person were to pass away from this, I don't know how you can live with yourself, be with the NCAA. Not to mention that these students do interact with other people. It's not like they're going to be in some sort of a bubble. So it only takes a couple of degrees of separation. Maybe it's a professor, maybe it's a student roommate who cares for his elderly mother on the weekends. There's a lot of different ways that this could happen. You can't do. I just don't think you can do this for people who are amateur athletes. If the NCAA wants to continue this charade that these guys are amateurs, then you need to do it consistently. They can't be amateur athletes except when there's a deadly virus. I think it's wrong. I heard what people like Lou Holtz said. Well, In D-Day, we sent young men out to die. Well, those are soldiers fighting a war. This is college football. It's not that important.
Yeah, it's an absolute disgrace. And a big problem with this is that the college football thing, that the NCAA really has no power in college football. It's all the conferences and the bowls. So right now they're sitting there thinking, we're going to lose a lot of money if we don't play football this year. We have to find a way to do it, whether it's conference only, whether it's like no fans in the building, or if you heard Ohio State, we're going to have 10,000 people in the horseshoe. Like, that stuff is all money motivated, and that's a very bad look. And the NCAA has no power here really to say, hey, we're not doing fall championships. Like, that's the only thing that's stopping. Like, I could see like soccer getting stopped, volleyball getting stopped, but like they don't have as much power in the football as they do over the NCAA tournament, which they control completely.
Yeah, that's true. And it's I don't know. I don't even know how to stop it. It's wrong because what you said is, you're right. It is a money grab. The problem is that the players aren't getting any of that money.
Yeah, that's a major issue. And I think they're going to attempt it until they absolutely cannot. I think I will say that there. They should not. I fear they're going to try, and that's the thing I'm worried about.
I think they are too. And knock on wood, I hope I'm wrong, but I think that there are going to be some college football players in this country who suffer a big consequence and hopefully don't lose their lives over this.
Yeah, that's the college issue. The NFL, very interesting right now as well. They're starting their training camp intakes. The preseason has been canceled, which I think was a very smart call about the players to demand this, because there was absolutely no point in playing preseason games, risking virus exposure for nothing counts in the standings.
There's probably never a point in playing preseason games, but that's a different story. So, yeah, I agree with that. Look, the NFL, I think, and I know we're going to do a whole podcast on this later, I think the NFL is in trouble. And I think they know they're in trouble. Goodell has started changing his words in his letter to the fans. He said something about complete the season, not finish the season.
Yeah, he described it as a complete season, not a full season. So it might hit.
Right.
He's at least acknowledging the possibility that games could get missed.
Right, and the football, I just don't see it. I think it's a big, big problem. I don't understand how they're going to play football. This is baseball, where you barely ever come into contact with somebody else. Football, you literally hit each other every single play.
Yeah.
I don't get it. All it takes is one defensive tackle has coronavirus. I don't see how the whole line doesn't have it.
Yeah. And then it leads to a competitive balance issue as well, because, like, let's say, for argument's sake, use your New York Giants, for example, here. If your entire offensive line gets coronavirus and cannot play over the weekend, you going to put your franchise quarterback out there behind 5 backups?
Can't do that. Exactly. It's a dangerous situation. It's a lot different than, let's just say, for argument's sake, the Miami Marlins have to throw some AA pitcher out there. All right, he's going to get his brains beat in, but nobody's going to get hurt.
Yeah.
You put Daniel Jones behind a backup offensive line, he can get hurt.
Yeah.
Seriously hurt. It's a problem, and I don't think the NFL is really. I think they kind of were operating under the it'll be gone by the fall. Now they're realizing that's not the case, and they're panicked. To me, if I were the NFL, I would start switching to some sort of a hub or bubble model immediately, because I think it's the only way to get this done.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they're going to do it. I mean, I know they still think they're going to have fans in the stands.
Yeah.
Another problem you run into with football, it's football more so than the other 4 sports, or the other 3 sports, has a lot of dinosaurs in those rooms. People who, they're football players, they're tough. They're supposed to go out there and put their bodies on the line for the team. That kind of thinking this isn't, I'm going to play with a sprained ankle. This is much, much, much more severe than that. And that kind of grinded out, tough man thinking is not appropriate for this kind of a virus.
Yeah, it's not. And the NFL, they're basically quoting themselves saying that we have a virtual bubble, where basically like what MLB teams have for the summer camp sort of thing, where like you go to your facility, you go home, you don't go out. I think that's problematic. I think they're going to be basically every team showing up at camp today is going to say, hey, look what happened in Miami. You cannot be going out. I think that's going to be beaten to their brains. But the issue they have is they're playing travel all over the country. That's the big problem. That's where things get worse. When people have people traveling close quarters on buses, on airplanes, that's where virus spreads out of control.
And what if somebody breaks the protocol, like happened with the Marlins? Now, what happened with the Marlins? Allegedly, right. What allegedly happened with the Marlins. It spread to 17 people on the same team. If someone does that but fortunately it didn't go to anybody in the Phillies. That's what we believe right now. And that kind of makes sense. Baseball is not a contact sport. You're outdoors. You're not really in close proximity to somebody. If you have a defensive tackle who's got coronavirus, everybody in the opposing offensive line is going to have coronavirus.
Yeah.
And it's going to spread like wildfire throughout the whole league. So unless the NFL is going to do daily testing, and they better really enforce that bubble.
Yeah, they do. And one note I will put out here, there's an interesting theory put out by Craig Mish, the Marlins reporter. He obviously right now is front and center on this. He had a theory on the NFL, and this is what he said on Twitter today. He said, if you want my unsolicited NFL opinion, it would be to never spend a night on the road all season. Show and go. Push all start times back for the season to allow more travel time. Fly in, play, and leave. So, in other words, really maintain the sanctity of virtual bubbles and just, as much as possible, have the team show up on game day and not spend the nights in the hotel or doing God knows what across the towns.
I'm all in favor of that. The one benefit that we are getting from these fanless games, and the NFL needs to stop with this fantasy that they're going to have fans in the stands. That's ridiculous. They're not going to have any fans in the stands.
Yeah.
But the benefit that you get of that, and I understand you got to work with the TV networks, but they're desperate for content, so they don't really care. You should be able to manipulate the schedule a little bit more. There's no reason you can't start a football game at 2 o'clock instead of 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
I would have a really hard time believing that CBS and Fox are going to give you a hard time about that.
I think they would push their primetime lineup back for football because, honestly, I talked to Alan also about this last week. There's no primetime lineup for them in the fall. There's nothing there.
Right, they have nothing to put on TV. So if that's what it takes, then so be it. And I think the same thing is true of baseball when we were talking about that earlier. They can play more doubleheaders. They can play straight doubleheaders. There's no fans, so you don't need to clean it out. And the networks do not care because they have nothing else to put on TV.
Yeah. I think, honestly, the only issues you really have are those West Coast games where you have teams flying east to west. I think the trickiest things would be, like teams like New England, the Jets had their schedule set up where they're planning to stay out west for a couple of days. And I think that's the trickiest situation you have going on there. You have to sort of figure that out in advance. But I think a lot of these teams, you can fly them out Sunday morning, play the game, fly them back home, avoid the hotels, avoid the chaos.
Sure. I mean, let's look at a game like when the Giants play the Eagles. Why can't the Giants go to Philadelphia in the morning?
Yeah,
they don't need a 2-hour drive.
Yeah, you don't need to be like in the hotel overnight. You can come from your homes, get on the bus at 8 o'clock in the morning, be there by 10:30, and kick the game off at 1.
Now, look, football coaches are creatures of habit, and they're not going to like that. They're going to say, "I need my players to get their rest. We need to have our Sunday morning meetings," and blah blah blah. But that's where the NFL needs to step in and say, "Yeah, too bad. Figure out a way to do it because there's a virus, and you're going to have to make some adjustments, coach."
Yeah, you are, and they're going to adjust anyway because as of recording, we're still in the period where players can opt out of the season, and there have been a surprisingly high number of opt-outs of semi-prominent players, and there are reports that dozens of players have already exercised the right to opt out. We've seen about half the New England defense opt out. We've seen a key defensive lineman on the Bears opt out. We've seen 2 big wide receivers, Devin Funchess and Marquise Goodwin, opt out, all for good reasons. This is something the NFL is looking at and saying, why are so many guys not willing to trust us on our plans?
Yeah, and I'm pleasantly surprised that you're seeing that because it's, like I said, football is a sport that has a lot of these tough guy attitudes. So I'm pleasantly surprised to see some players starting to take their health seriously. I think we have seen that across the league. We Andrew Luck retire young, and for the most part, he was given a lot of support. So it's a problem, though, and I think what's going on is that the players realize that the nature of this game is unsafe.
Yeah,
there's. I mean, don't tell me you're going to put a face shield on my helmet and that's going to get rid of COVID. That's ridiculous.
Yeah,
it's an unsafe game, and if you have a very good chance of getting coronavirus if you go play football. I think that's just the bottom line.
Yeah, and you also seen, I think a lot of it is we talk about with the baseball, and baseball, I even mentioned some players might reconsider opting out after the Marlins situation, but football, a lot of these teams, especially all the guys in the Patriots who are like, I've won, I've gotten paid, my contract only gets pushed back a year, so I have the money coming next year. Like, what is it? What am I doing this for? Why is my motivation? Especially if Tom Brady's gone and I'm not going to win a Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, I agree. Baseball, the benefit that baseball had is that they have this labor dispute. So I think there's a part of the guys feeling like they have to play because they have to defend the union, and the union fought for them to get the prorated money, so they got to go out there and play and get all that prorated money. NFL doesn't have that kind of a situation, so I expect that you're going to see a fair number of opt-outs.
Yeah, and the NFL also has negotiated a settlement here where basically it's like you get, like, if the season starts, you get your year towards free agency if you're there, but you don't get paid if the games don't get played. It's like they came to the and said, hey, we can't pay Dak Prescott $31 million to play 3 football games. That'd be ridiculous.
Sure. And that's fine. But I'm very, very pessimistic about us seeing NFL football this year. I just don't think it's going to happen. Yeah,
like, especially, like, as we said, in a sport where there is very little physical contact, to have one team get 17 cases in a span of 4 on the first weekend of the season, it's not bode well for the NFL where, as you said, every play there's hitting, people are sweating all over each other, and little things like we're not swapping jerseys after the game is not going to do anything.
Yeah, no, the rules that the NFL came up with are laughable. We're not going to swap jerseys. The coaches aren't allowed to yell.
Yeah.
It's a joke. It's a complete joke. What are you going to do about the fact that you have 300-pound men hitting each other every single play?
Yeah.
And the answer is nothing.
The answer is nothing. And then you also have to worry with the football players, like reporting symptoms. You have to worry with some of these guys who are saying, like, like, I'm on the brink of I'm on the bottom of the roster. I need to make an impression on my coach. I have a sniffle, but I think I just have a cold. I'm gonna play. I'm not gonna tell him I'm gonna play the game. That's something you could really have a problem with.
Yeah, look, that's a problem in all sports, but especially in football, because football is a culture of, unless you literally cannot walk, you should be out.
Yeah, it's definitely a scary point because I think the NFL, I think they're going to, based on the fact that they're not really going to interact with anybody in the preseason, they're going to be by themselves. I think they will get to opening day. I'm very pessimistic they're going to be able to do a full season. And I think a lot of this, again, goes back to, as we said before, all your politicians who have been trying to tell you the coronavirus is just the flu, it's the sniffles, you don't need to wear a mask, you can do whatever you want, liberate this state, liberate that state. And that's why the virus is spreading unchecked and why all our sports are in jeopardy that are not in the bubbles.
Yeah. If people had done what Andrew Cuomo did and what CDC recommended, we'd be in a different situation. But that's not the case. The president and some of his allies decided that they could not be tolerated anymore. We hit May 1. It's time to go. And here we are. And that's why the United States, compared to the rest of the first world nations, is the laughing stock of the world right now.
Yeah, I mean, we saw in Europe the Bundesliga finished with no issues. The Premier League finished the season with no issues. We have 4 days of baseball and one team's already on the sideline. That's entirely due to community virus transmission. No matter how much Rob Manfred's protocols work, or no matter how much the NFL wants to put their teams in a virtual bubble, if you're playing games where you're traveling and you're still in your communities, you're not hunkered down in the middle of the Disney bubble or in Toronto or in Edmonton, stuff like this is going to happen. And this is entirely due to the lack of concern about containing this virus in the country.
Look at the KBO. KBO has been going on for months now. I haven't heard a word about an outbreak there.
They have not. And where the KBO was that they had one positive case that would shut the entire league for 2 weeks. The entire league, yet MLB has 17 people on one team down. We're still powering through to get that cash. It's ridiculous.
You put it, yeah, that's the right word, ridiculous. And you're right that's exactly what it is. The politicians, the same guys who told you that it would be unacceptable to not have sports this fall are going to be the reason that you don't have sports this fall.
Yes, they will. And Phil, thanks for all the time today. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank you for coming on.
Sure. Look, you're welcome. Like I said at the beginning, I really wish I wasn't on right now. I wish I was watching the Yankees, but that's not the case.
It is not the case. It's wrecking havoc on our poor fantasy league, the one that used to be a part of here. It's like we have one guy in this league right now who, through this craziness, has a guy with COVID on his roster, and a bunch of guys on the Yankees and the Phillies has gotten no games out of them this weekend. He's in big trouble. It's just a chaos that we're living through right now.
Yeah, the fantasy baseball. I'm happy I didn't sign up this year because I don't know how the hell you even do that. And fantasy football, that'll be another interesting one because obviously that's a far more popular fantasy game than baseball. So we'll see how that goes in fall. But look, I hope, I really do, because I know I've been negative and I'm trying to be positive, and I really hope that this was just a one-off incident, what happened with the Marlins. I hope someone did something stupid and it's not going to happen again, and we're going to get through the season without any issues like this. But man, I was not expecting to have this conversation one weekend into the season.
Yeah, for sure. I want to thank you. I also want to point out, everybody, if you want to check out some of the podcast episodes that have been on this week, a conversation with Carpinello, our good friend Joe Choppy was on a Ranger Fan Forum in there. You could check out the podcast, justendthesuffering.wordpress.com. You can subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify. Follow on YouTube as well, Mike Phillips on YouTube. I put the individual conversations out there. This whole conversation is going to be going up on YouTube shortly, Phil.
Okay, great. Well, I'm excited to listen. I hope the listeners enjoy it, find it informational, and yeah, look, I really, really hope that we get baseball, because I will say that it was great this weekend watching the Yankees again, and not just the Yankees. I watched a lot of games, but just to be able to watch baseball was great, and I hope I can keep doing it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I'm sitting here, I'm watching the Met game right now. I've been locked into every pitch because I'm sitting there every day going, boy, I don't know if they're going to be able to play tomorrow. I'm going to save what I can get.
Yeah, but look, I watched the opener. It was awesome seeing Garrett Cole. Sunday, the Yankees, that game with the Nats was sloppy. It was bad baseball, but it was still just, man, I got something Sunday afternoon, sit on my couch, watch something on TV. This is great. And I was looking forward to, during the work week, being able to log off when I'm done with my work day and watch baseball, like some semblance of normal. So I hope I get that.
Tomorrow you'll get it.
Yeah, and I'll be tuned in tomorrow for the first pitch in Baltimore.
Yep. You can also leave your feedback and star ratings this podcast as well. You have done that in the past. It helps the podcast get even better going forward, so thank you for that.
Yeah, anybody listening, please do it. The podcast is, I enjoy it. I enjoy listening. I enjoy coming on, so hope that we can keep it going.
Yeah, you can also follow me on Twitter at mphillips331. That's MPHILLIPS 331. I'm going to go with the hashtag New York Bubble because I think that's what's coming here down the pike for baseball.
Hey, I'm all in favor of whatever it takes to get this thing played. I'm all in favor of it, and if Governor Cuomo is willing to work with the league, they should take him up on his offer.
All right, that's all for this bonus episode of the podcast. Next week, our regular conversation. We're going to do golf with our buddy Dan DiMartini, talk about preview the PGA Championship, Hold Mill with Pete Considori, and more. Until then, stay safe, everybody.
This has been the Just End the Suffering podcast.
I'm out.